extraordinarily intertwined relationship between the United States and Israel, and the less than satisfactory relationship between the United States Congress and the Turkish Parliament and the Turkish government. And I had the privilege with some Republican colleagues of helping to create the U.S.-Turkey caucus. And I'm proud to report that that caucus, against many odds, is now one of the strongest caucuses in the United States Congress. And the reason
is Erol Cebeci. I'm the Executive Director at SETA Foundation at Washington, D.C. And we feel privileged to organize this event with the German Marshall Fund of the United States to host His Excellency Egemen Bagis, Minister for European Affairs and the Chief Negotiator of Turkey. This is a particularly timely discussion on Turkey and the future of Transatlantic Alliance. Today, there seems to be some movement in Turkey's European Union membership negotiation process after a period of little progress over the past couple of years. While significant obstacles remain and there are many chapters yet to be opened, the recent positive agenda talks look promising, at least for the moment. There is also talk of a free trade agreement between the US and the European Union. As Turkey is already part of the European Union Customs Union, this will have an impact on US-Turkey as well as European Union-Turkey relations. The Middle East has witnessed revolutions and currently is going through major political turmoil. Turkey is a major stakeholder as regional stability and security directly impact Turkey. Both the European Union and the United States have interests at stake as well. Meaningful conversation among the three may contribute to stability and the peace in the region. No doubt that there are serious challenges and risks in all these areas. We look forward to Minister's perspective on these issues and how they may impact the transatlantic relations. Finally, Minister Bagis has been a good friend and a great colleague to work with. He has served as the representative of Istanbul in the AK Party for the last 10 years. It is, for those of you who haven't seen, it is a beautiful city where Minister Bagis has served for 10 years, the city he loves and he's loved by its residents. He has served in the Turkish parliament and in the last two Turkish governments in various critical positions throughout the last decade. He also happens to be one of the very few people who knows and understands this capital, Washington, the best. So we feel privileged to hear from him. And dear Minister, thank you for accepting to speak here today. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction, both to my dear friend Bob Wexler and Erol Cebeci, and thank to all of you for spending your time to listen to me when there's such a beautiful weather outside. unique day. Every April 24th is a unique day in Turkish-American relations. Both the Turkish Americans and the Armenian Americans try their best to lobby with the White House and the State Department about which words are going to be used in the official declaration or message of the president. But I think we have to look beyond words or statements. We have to focus on mutual interests. Today, unfortunately, the Armenian diaspora are hijacking the real national interests of Armenia. Turkey and Armenia could be great partners in a very unique neighborhood. But unfortunately, those who try to poison the relationship and the platform, and I call them hate merchants, are trying to capitalize the sorrow memories of the past. So it's also very unique for me to be here in Washington, D.C. on another April 24th and talk about Turkish-American relations when there is an issue that's shadowing it. Therefore, I would like to remind everyone that Turkey has, is, and will continue to be on the side of having an objective look at what really happened in 1950. 9 years ago, my Prime Minister, with full support of our Parliament, government, and the opposition, with a unanimous parliamentary backing, sent a letter to President of Armenia. Prime Minister Erdogan is probably the first Turkish politician ever to say, I am ready to face my own history if you're ready to face yours. And we have invited Armenia and all involved countries to contribute with scholars, historians, by opening all their archives. And Turkey is ready to really understand what happened. Our archives tell us that this was a civil war during a world war. But if others have other findings, we're ready to analyze them together. Once the historians, scholars come up with a historical perspective, a scholarly, objective perspective, then as politicians, we can look at it and then make some decisions. But right now, trying to push Turkey to accept a crime that has not been committed by today's Turkey is unjust. I think it's important for us to have an open and broad understanding on all these issues. Sometimes lack of broad approach can always create wrong results. And I think we all have to focus on the future and get over some of the problems. We need long-term perspective vision. Turkey is going through a very interesting period in terms of solving one of our own problems with that kind of a perspective. I'm talking about the solution process, as we call it in Turkish. Since 1978, Turkey had been dealing with PKK terrorist organization. And now the PKK's leadership has announced that they will have a ceasefire, they will lay arms, and they will depart and migrate from the region, which has been a welcoming news for every citizen of Turkey. But this is not an overnight decision. This is not a new process. This is actually a process that started on October 3 of 2002, and it has been strengthened every day. 20 years ago in my country, people were afraid to admit they were Kurds. Today we have 24 hours of Kurdish broadcasting on state television. We had a former president who was also a good friend of the United States, Turgut Özal, who publicly said that his mother was Kurdish. He said his aunt did not speak any Turkish, but even he was hesitant Also, this process, as we call it, the solution process, includes every citizen of Turkey. In our constitution, it's very clearly stated that all citizens are equal. Unfortunately, in the implementation, they were not all equal. Every group has been victimized at one point or another and felt that they were outsiders. Now the solution process your comments and also respond to your questions. Thank you for listening. How should we do it? Okay. So, Bob, you will be the moderator? Or you will ask the first question? You want to start grilling first?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to open it up. You spoke convincingly of Prime Minister Erdogan's visit to Libya, where he courageously, I think, established that there is a consistency, especially not an inconsistency, between being an observant Muslim and committed to secular democracy. He had a similar message. He had a similar message when he was in Egypt. And you also talked convincingly about the disastrous effects of terrorism. In the context of Turkey's unique role, then, if you would talk about Turkey's unique role relative to the leading state sponsor of terror, Iran, where I believe it's fair to say the United States and Turkey share a commitment to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear weapon holder, but may have different views in terms of the best tactics to employ to get to that result.
Well, countries do not get to choose their neighbors. Sometimes I ask my European colleagues if they are interested in swapping neighbors. Most of the issues that I deal with would be much more easier to be dealt with. They could. Turkey and Iran enjoy a border. It's probably the oldest unchanged border in the world, because those two nations, the Turks and the Persians, who have had their own states for more than 1,000 years, have been balancing power. It's not always easy to negotiate with a country that invented concept of bargaining and invented the game chess. Iranians have very complicated minds. And we think, having spent thousands of years in the same neighborhood with them, we try to understand them. At least we're closer geographically. Sometimes the conventional methods, like embargoes or isolating a nation, might not yield the same result in every different case. With a mentality like the one that's in Tehran, I think dialogue could yield more positive results compared to the status quo of isolation. However, this doesn't mean that we are indifferent to the threats in the region. Of course, we, with our experience in terms of being in the neighborhood, have our own approach, but our approach to solving the problem might sometimes be different. But at the end, we all want to see a better a better world in peace. And I want to quote once again Martin Luther King, who said, "We have learned to fly the air like the birds and swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned the simple art of living together as brothers." Especially in our difficult neighborhood, I think this statement is very relevant. You mentioned the recent efforts for rapprochement led by President Obama between Turkey and Israel. I only wish it had not taken 3 years for Israel to apologize for having executed 10 Turkish citizens in international waters. Should have been done, and I know you agree and you work for that yourself. You tried very hard. But sometimes things take time. As far as Iran is concerned, I think we have to spend more time and work together to convince them to become active parts of the rest of the world and become international players, and remind them of their responsibilities for global peace.
Mr. Bush, I get the privilege to ask the second question before we open the floor for questions. And if you allow me, I will go a little bit personal, because you, as the Minister for European Affairs and Chief Negotiator, you do not have only the portfolio of negotiating and with the European Union membership, but the public opinion is a great concern to you, as I have known your work and how much effort you spend. And it is not only the public opinion in France and Austria, but I would like to be more specific on Turkey. So are there days that when you wake up and you see, especially because the economic news of Europe travels fast around the world, and I know in Turkish press people read a lot, and a lot of people probably thank God that Turkey is not part of European Union at this point. So it makes your life really difficult. Are there days you wake up and you say, this may not work for Turkey? And how do you cope with that if you have those feelings? Thank you.
I never doubt that it's worth for Turkey to be in this process. As far as I'm concerned, the EU process is much more important than the end result. My goal is to make sure that my country has the same democracy and freedom of expression standards that exist in Sweden, educational standards of United Kingdom, food hygiene standards of France, fashion standards of Italy, and so forth, highway standards of Germany. Once we achieve those standards, and we're working towards them, being a member or not would be a secondary issue. We might end up like Norway, which chose not to become a member, but after going through the whole process and completing all the chapters. And the Norwegian people decided that twice after two referenda, not to become members of EU. But even today, when the European Parliament or Council of Europe takes a decision, Norwegians act faster than most member states in analyzing the pros and cons, and if they like it, they implement it even faster than most of the member states. So they use EU as a consultant. And this process has also been very helpful for Turkey. We get on average 900 million euros per year in grants from Europe to prepare us for potential membership. We get free advice on every issue, sometimes on issues that we haven't even asked for advice. Last year, we sent 61,000 Turkish citizens, predominantly youngsters, to different educational programs in EU. This year, we intend to increase that number to 70,000. So this helps broaden our vision, the vision of our people. So the process is important. You asked about the public opinion in Turkey. The recent polls show us, when we ask our citizens if they still want to join the EU, we still have around 45 to 50% who answer in an affirmative way. But when we revise the question and ask, do you think Turkey will be admitted to EU? That number goes down to 20–25%. But when we ask them, do you think the EU reforms have been good for Turkey's economy, human rights, and democracy? That number jumps up to 70 to 75%. So people understand what we're trying to do at the EU Ministry by constantly bringing new reform packages to the Council of Ministers and to the Parliament. What we're doing is good for Turkey. And they would like these good things to result in a happy ending, but they have major doubts that our counterpart, Europe, has the vision to bring this to a happy end. And of course, Europe is dealing with the worst economic crisis of its history. And we also have to give them some time to digest and analyze their mistakes. There have been many mistakes made. I blame one of Europe's major rules for the economic crisis. There are 27 member states in the EU, soon to be 28, and every major decision has to be unanimous. When you have an NGO bringing your board together, you cannot get a unanimous decision most of the time. Bringing 28 different countries with different national interests to have one position on every single issue is very, very difficult. Because of that unanimity rule, countries look the other way to each other's shortcomings. Those countries that are having major economic crisis today were the countries that were cheating on the EU rules. And everyone in Brussels knew that the numbers they were reporting to the Commission were not accurate. But they looked the other way because they needed the votes of those countries on some other issues. But that created a bubble which grew over time and exploded. But we know from our experience that no crisis lasts forever. Back in 1999, we had 8,000% interest rates among banks. With the right fiscal discipline and monetary policy, crisis can be resolved. And right now we are the healthiest economy in Europe. So we know that the crisis will come to an end. And Europe will continue to be the geography in the world where per capita prosperity is the highest. And when I say per capita prosperity, I'm not only talking about income. Prosperity is income plus human rights, plus food safety, plus educational standards, transportation standards, labor standards, and so forth. And we also know that after the crisis, Europe will come to its senses and make the right decisions. So what we require is patience and determination, and I assure you, Turkey has both.
Why don't we open this up? It's been male-dominated, so please.
My name is Erol. I'm a PhD candidate at Howard University in Political Science Department. I'm one of those people working on Turkish-EU relationships on my dissertation. My question is, you said that it's the process that's important. It's not the end result as far as EU membership is concerned. And we know that there's been a lot of reforms and there's a lot of change in Turkey. However, what was in my mind was when we're going through this process, EU membership process, and we see that Turkey is emerging as a regional actor, as an international player, and acting as a mediator. When it comes to the last point, it's miraculously, in a couple of days, yes, we are at the gates of EU, and we have to decide, yes, are we going to get in, and they are welcoming us. What do we do at that point? Are we willing to give up our sovereignty to the European Union, or are we going to be like Britain and not be part of the monetary union? How is it going to be when it's the last day to decide? Will we do a Norway?
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. When Bob Wexler and I were counterparts, when he was heading the Turkey caucus and I was heading the US caucus in the Turkish parliament, he used to send delegations and I would very proudly host them. In one of those delegations, I took them to the General Assembly Hall of the Turkish Parliament, where you know very well, and right behind the speaker's seat is a big writing which says, "Sovereignty unconditionally belongs to the people." It's in Turkish, egemenlik kayıtsız şartsız milletindir. So one of our American congressmen asked me, what does it say? And I translated, and I said, it says sovereignty unconditionally belongs to the people. He said, then why in the hell are you trying to join the EU? And I responded by giving in some of our sovereignty. We're getting shares of a bigger sovereignty. We're becoming partners in a bigger sovereignty called the EU, because we are one of those countries whose vote becomes very critical in every decision. EU has this policy to candidate countries, do as I say, but not as I do. Until you become a member, they question everything. The day after you become a member, you are free to do whatever you want, which is wrong, but it's the reality. And hopefully, once we join the EU, we will change that for the better, and not only we will help Europe say the right things and also do the right things.
That's a great answer. Please.
Thank you. Barbara Slavin from the Atlantic Council. Very nice to see you again, Mr. Minister. You go back to Syria. I know it's not your portfolio, but tell me how this ends. The United States is intervening from behind the curtain, training people, having some impact on the rebels. There's non-lethal aid, so-called, beginning to go in. Others are supporting them. But it's over 2 years, 80,000 dead, all these refugees, and the radicalization process that's going on in the country, and also, I would assume, in the refugee camps outside. How does it end? What do we need to do? Thank you.
I kind of hinted what needs to be done in my remarks. We have to convince all members of the Security Council, including the permanent members, to be more specific. I think President Obama needs to convince President Putin not to support that dictator, Assad. How he can do that is another issue, which, as you rightfully said, Barbara, is not my portfolio, so I'd rather stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Dana Marshall, President of Transnational Strategy Group. Minister, let me turn your attention to a subject that's very close to issues that I deal with, which is this nexus of free trade area negotiations. It's very well known, the situation, I think increasingly well known, the situation that Turkey's facing with respect to negotiations with the United States. Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Babacan, was just here last week on that issue and many others. What I wanted to ask you about in the capacity that you're dealing with is what sort of collaboration can Turkey expect from Brussels as Brussels negotiates with Washington? It's an important question, not only for strictly trade policy reasons, but because the negotiations the United States and Europe are going to be starting in the next few months. Many people have observed, and I agree, is going to be a new model for an international commercial environment. The more collaboration that Turkey and Brussels can have, the easier will it be for Turkey to negotiate. Perhaps it'll be a parallel negotiation with the United States. And so that this can be done in as coordinated a way as possible. The question for you is, can you expect cooperation in that area? Will there be even informal discussion? I understand that Turkish representatives will not be at the table for the innumerable negotiations over some unknown period of time, but will there be even an informal way for Turkey's interest to somehow be reflected in Brussels' positions?
Well, it ought to be. When Turkey signed the agreement for customs union, joined the customs union in 1996, with our taboos of the time, we were afraid that in the long run we will be forced to trade with Cyprus, a country that we don't have any diplomatic relations with. Therefore, we chose not to become automatic partners into every new free trade agreement that the Commission signs with a third country. However, because we're in the customs union, when Europe makes a concession, we have to make the same concessions. But when Europe gets a concession, we don't automatically get the same benefits. Therefore, every time the Commission signed a new free trade agreement, we had to go and sign a parallel agreement. But in its nature, this is wrong. And one of the things that we are trying to do with European Union is to change the customs union agreement to make sure that Turkey automatically becomes a part of every trade agreement that is made. And of course, we would also like to be present in the talks of when that is being made. But the talks between EU and US are bigger than Europe, bigger than Turkey, bigger than US. This has a lot to do with the international approach to trade. This will probably have a major influence in the World Trade Organization's activities. It will bring a new depth and breadth to the way we trade in the world. Therefore, we follow the developments very closely. I've already met several times with my counterparts in Brussels on this issue. And I've also raised this issue with the people that I will meet here in Washington. I just want to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where Turkish public opinion starts questioning our membership to customs union. If it comes to a point where economically it doesn't make any sense for Turkey to stay in the customs union, and Turkey is not an emirate or a sultanate, Turkey is a very strong democracy, and public opinion does matter a lot, then we will have to look at other options. And as Minister for EU Affairs, that would not make my life any easier. It would probably make it even more complicated than it already is. Therefore, we're in the beginning of a process, and we follow it. And again, as I told Ms. Cebeci, we will cross that bridge when we come to it, but we want to kind of make sure we come to the right bridge, not the wrong bridge.
How about in the back?
Thank you. I've been in trade policy for about 50 years, so I always feel I'm like the History Channel. And I was in...
We can learn a lot from you then.
Not sure you can anymore. We'll learn, but we'll find out. But anyway, I was in Turkey in 1974, if I recall correctly, negotiating an agreement whereby Turkey agreed to reduce some MFN duties to remove any adverse effect on U.S. trade from the existing Turkey-EU free trade agreement. And this was under GSP, which we're able to grant you, which you eventually lost. Two very short questions. One, I really think it's time for Turkey to negotiate an FTA with the U.S. Even if you're able to protect your interest on the tariff side, and we took note, most of the, I don't know whether they call it transatlantic, since it goes pretty far beyond the Atlantic, but pretty much the transatlantic trade and investment partnership being the special word there. And so we're involved in and so on, is going to go into regulatory issues, there's going to be a special bucket for global issues and so on. So it does make more sense for me, and my suggestion, that you should suggest a free trade agreement. We have enough former congressmen here who would certainly be the traditional supporters of such action. My second question is much more local, but also fairly specific. The Africans are really being screwed by the Europeans these days, because the Europeans are going to withdraw tariff preferences from countries who do not enter into reciprocal arrangements with them in about 14 months, about 16 months. My question is, does Turkey provide the same preferences to Africa as the Africans do under their various, as Europeans do? And would you also withdraw those preferences given the fact that you have such a major commercial and very positive development role in that region. Thank you so much. Oh, Steve Landy, Manchester Trade.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. As far as Turkey signing a free trade agreement with the United States, it takes two to tango. If there's an offer, we'll look at it. One of the issues that would be on the agenda of my Prime Minister when he comes here in 3 weeks is to enhance Turkish-American relations, and not only military relations, diplomatic relations, social relations, but also economic relations. So I'm sure all options would be evaluated at the highest level. And my Prime Minister is going to be coming here with around 50, 60 top CEOs of Turkey. So he's coming with a very strong business delegation who are interested in enhancing our relations, business relations. As far as the relations with Africa, we are opening more embassies in Africa than any other country right now. We now have 34 embassies in Africa. And our national flag carrier, Turkish Airlines, is flying to more African cities than many other international airlines. When I mentioned our trade, 40% of our trade is with Europe, that percentage was 60% 10 years ago. Because we are spreading our eggs into different baskets, that has come down to 40%. And one of the areas where we are increasing our trade with is Africa. But our membership to Customs Union has its own limitations that sometimes limit us as well. We have very good relations with many members of the African Union, and we are enhancing our trade relations. But we have to do that within the boundaries that are permitted by the Customs Union. That's one of the reasons that I'm worried about the Customs Union membership being questioned in Turkey. So right now, we are trying to do our best within the boundaries of the Customs Union.
Okay, I think we have time for two more, this gentleman and this gentleman. And if it's quick enough, who's that?
Thanks a lot. Niklas Anzinger from the American Enterprise Institute. It has already been mentioned that vast amounts of natural gas reserves have been found in the Levant Basin, i.e. off the Israeli, the Cypriotic, and the Lebanese coasts. Does Turkey want to get its share from Eastern Mediterranean gas, and would Turkey be willing to cooperate with Israel on that matter? Thanks.
You want to take all?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we do all three?
And then I'll respond together.
My question is a bit off the beaten path, if you will. I'm sure there are no talking points for it, but I hope you'll give it your best and take a stab at it, as the expression goes. It's about Yilmaz Güney. More specifically, it's about his perception of the Kurdish question in Turkey. For those of you who don't know Güney, he was at one time Turkey's most famous actor and director. Mr. Bagis, you're probably too young to remember him, but I know you're not too old to learn from him.
I visited his graveyard a month ago in Paris.
Happy birthday to you, by the way. In 1968, 2 years before you were born, he
Wait, if I could just, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's coming. He wrote the following in a magazine in Istanbul. I was told, one day I was asked where I was from. I told them my dad is from Cebeci. They were surprised to hear the name Cebeci. They had never heard of it. Where is it, they asked. Cebeci is a town of Naples, I said. They thought for a bit. They looked at each other. We know Italy well. Perhaps you're wrong. Naples doesn't have a town like that. If Cebeci were in Italy, they would have known it. Cebeci is a town in Urfa, and Urfa is a city in Turkey. The people of our country are kind-hearted. They're broad-minded. They know Italy well. They know France well. They even know China well. But they don't know their country. They will compete with one another to help the stricken folks of other lands. They will write poems for them. They will even sing dirges for them. If there are books about them, they will buy them. but they have a habit of turning their back to the people living in their own country. They don't see them, they can't see them. Yilmaz Güney is probably watching us from his room in heaven. Can you tell him that the Kurds and the Turks are as equal as the Slovaks and the Czechs, or the Bosniaks and the Serbs, or even closer to home, like Cypriot Greeks and the Cypriot Turks?
The gentleman in the back. Yeah, the aqua shirt.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for trekking across the Atlantic.
Before you begin, we call that color turquoise.
Well, Miami Dolphin fans call it aqua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for coming here. Today, I'm going to pose a question to you, not on behalf of a news organization or political apparatus, nor any interest of Armenians or Kurds. I'm here at the behest of a family of 5 fatherless children, whose father, Abdul Jabbar Igde, has been detained on November 27, 2011, for expressing freedoms which we in the United States of America and the European Union take for granted. He was investigating the torture and imprisonment of Kurdish children by Turkish security forces in Cizre and Diyarbakir. This happened under an Erdogan administration, and what would you like to say to those 5 children who deserve an honest answer, and to the Olympic Committee, whose values of camaraderie, friendship, and democratic equality Turkey is now denying to 5 fatherless children? Thank you, sir.
Well, let's start from last. I don't know of the situation of those 5 children. I wish them well, but if you can give me some more information after this meeting, I'll be more than happy to look into the issue. Yeah, I'll look into it. I'm sure my embassy has a file on this issue too. There's always 2 sides to a coin, but we will do our best to make sure those 5 kids have access to their father as soon as possible. As far as Yilmaz Güney is concerned, I visited Yilmaz Güney's graveyard. He's been buried in Paris for more than 40 years now. He escaped from Turkey when I was a very young kid. But he did not escape from Turkey because of his political ideals or what he wrote about Cebeci. He escaped from Turkey because he killed a prosecutor. Let's not distinguish. If Güney was alive today, he would be free to come to Turkey. You mentioned Cebeci, which is a district of Urfa. How many people here know Urfa? Did you know Urfa is the city where Abraham, the prophet of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all together, the father of all religions, was burned? Not many people know that. I mean, there's lack of knowledge on towns, on cities. I'm trying to promote Istanbul, my own constituency, but a city like Istanbul should not need to be promoted, but it does need it. So we deal with all these issues. But your question, are Kurds today equal to other ethnicities in Turkey? That's what the solution process is all about, to make sure everyone becomes equal. I mentioned we have issues. A lady with a headscarf can be a member of parliament in United Kingdom, in Belgium, in France, in Germany, but not in a country where there is 99% of the population are Muslim. To me, that's not fair either. And I said this, I said once that people's representatives should represent the people. And I was prosecuted in the highest court of the country, at the Constitutional Court, because some prosecutor thought this was very provocative. Things happen. An individual in the audience has gone through this process in a very heartbreaking manner and lived the pains of those dark days. And we're trying to change, but not for one segment of the society. We're trying to change for all segments of the society, for each and every one citizen to feel that they're equal citizens, no matter what their ethnicity is. no matter what their political ideas are, no matter what their mother tongue was, no matter which football team they support. Everyone should be equal. That's why the EU process is very important, because it helps us face some of our own shortcomings, of our own problems. And it has rules that have been very efficient in 27 countries already. Therefore, I always argue that EU is Turkey's dietitian. We all know we have to watch what we eat and we need to exercise regularly to lead a healthy life, but sometimes we need the advice of a dietitian to give us the right prescription, what to eat, what not to eat, how much exercise, cardio activity to be involved in. Once you implement that prescription, the dietitian doesn't lose weight, you do. You become healthy, you get rid of your excess weight, and you become more dynamic, more fit. Turkey is implementing the EU prescription. It's still the best around. The fact that the dietitian himself or herself is overweight, has a few clogged arteries, is moody, doesn't make the prescription bad. The prescription is still the best around. And those EU member states who have implemented the prescription without cheating are doing fine. Like Estonia, like Sweden, like Germany. But those who were cheating are having economic problems. And those who did not cheat are trying to save those who did, because of the EU's unanimity problem. As far as Turkey cooperating with Israel in terms of any potential gas in the Mediterranean, why not? But after normalizing the relations, which is a process that started. Don't forget the fact that Turkey is the first Muslim country ever to recognize the sovereignty of Israel. Turkey has convinced many other Islamic nations to do the same. What I had a hard time understanding for the last 3 years was how could smart men like Netanyahu risk losing the only Muslim friend his country had? Apparently, with the aftermath of his elections and the change in his cabinet, he has now seen the light. And I hope he will continue to do the same. Thank you all for listening.